Dion Carter was 38 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon, he believed he had a good marriage. He was a logistics manager, not flashy, not loud, just a steady man who showed love the only way he knew how, through work. 14 months of overtime, missed Saturdays, skipped lunches, all of it quietly stacked until he could put a pearl-white Nissan Pathfinder with a red bow in his wife's driveway. 3 days later, he came home early and parked at the curb. His wife and her best friend were standing beside that same car, laughing. Completely unaware he was 20 yards away with his windows down. What he heard his wife say next, about that car, about another man, about exactly where she planned to drive it, turned 14 months of sacrifice into something he could never unfeel. Dion didn't move, didn't say a word. He simply raised a hand, waved, and walked inside. And in that silence, something shifted in him permanently. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The street was still dark. Not the deep, heavy dark of midnight, but the soft gray of a world not quite ready to open its eyes. The kind of quiet where the only sounds were crickets and the distant hum of a neighbor's AC unit. Dion Carter stood in his driveway at 6:47 in the morning, dragging a yellow chamois cloth slowly across the hood of a pearl-white Nissan Pathfinder, and felt something close to peace. The red bow on the roof was his idea. Corny, maybe. He didn't care. He stepped back and looked at the car the way a man looks at something he built with his own hands. 4 years newer than anything they'd owned before. Heated seats, blind spot monitors, a backup camera that actually worked. Pearl white, because Brianna had mentioned once, almost 2 years ago, just offhand, the way she said things she didn't think he was really absorbing, that she'd always wanted a white SUV. He had been absorbing it. 14 months. That was what this car cost him. Not just in money, though the number was real and it wasn't small, but in Saturdays spent at the distribution center while Brianna went to brunch with Patrice. In lunches he ate at his desk from a brown bag so he could move the overtime directly into the savings account he'd opened just for this. In the Monday morning tiredness that had become so familiar, it stopped feeling like tiredness and started feeling like just the way he was. He was 38 years old. He managed regional logistics operations for a mid-size freight company outside of Atlanta, a job he had worked his way into from the bottom. The kind of climb that left no room for shortcuts or luck. He was not a man who needed applause for doing what he said he would do. He never had been. His mother had raised him in a house where follow-through was the baseline, not the achievement. You said a thing, you did the thing. That was all. Love worked the same way, as far as he was concerned. He and Brianna had been married 6 years now. Met through mutual friends at a birthday party in Midtown. Dated for 2 years before he proposed. She was sharp and warm and beautiful in a way that made rooms pay attention to her. She knew how to move through the world, how to dress for it, how to talk to it, how to make it feel like everything was going exactly as planned. Dion had always admired that about her. He was not a man who needed to be the center of anything. He was content being the structure that held things up. They lived in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb south of Atlanta. No kids yet. Brianna had said the timing wasn't right. First it was her career. Then it was the house. Then it was something else he couldn't quite pin down. He had accepted each reason the same way he accepted most things, quietly, and with the private belief that the right moment would eventually arrive. He was a patient man. It was one of the things he considered a strength. He folded the chamois cloth and tucked it into his back pocket. The front door opened. Brianna stepped onto the porch in her silk robe, her hair wrapped, squinting slightly against the pale morning light. She stopped when she saw the car. Her hand went to her mouth. "Dion." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. He smiled. "Morning." She came down the porch steps barefoot, moving carefully on the concrete like she didn't quite trust what she was seeing. She circled the Pathfinder slowly, trailing her fingers just above the paint without touching it, the way you approach something you're afraid might disappear if you're not careful. "This is mine?" she asked. "Pearl white," he said. "Like you wanted." She turned and looked at him, and her eyes were shining. Then she crossed the driveway in 3 quick steps and wrapped both arms around his neck, and he held her there, one hand flat against her back, her perfume warm and familiar in the cool morning air. "Baby," she said against his shoulder. "I love it." He nodded. He held her a second longer. Then she pulled back, looked at the car again, and the expression on her face shifted into something faster and brighter. She reached through the open driver's window for her phone. He hadn't even seen her bring it outside, and she was already stepping back, framing the shot, finding the angle that caught the bow and the white paint and the soft morning light all at once. "I have to post this," she said. She was already typing. "Oh my God, the color is perfect." Dayan stood with his hands in his pockets and watched her. She took 6 photos before she was satisfied. She posed beside the driver's door. She posed with her hand on the bow. She held her face near the side mirror and laughed. And the laugh was real. And the joy looked real. And all of it was real enough. She never asked how long he'd saved. He watched her smile at her phone screen while the morning brightened around them, and somewhere in the quiet part of his chest, beneath the warmth and the satisfaction and the genuine pleasure of having made her happy, something small and shapeless settled in and stayed. He couldn't have named it. Not yet. He just noticed it was there. 3 days later, a burst pipe at the Conley Road distribution site sent half the afternoon crew home before 2 o'clock. Dayan was one of them. He didn't call ahead. There was no reason to. He was just a man coming home early on a Tuesday, loosening his collar as he turned off the main road and onto their street, thinking about nothing more than getting out of his work boots. He saw Patrice's car first. A silver Accord, parked at the curb 2 houses down from theirs. Not unusual. Patrice Hollis had been Brianna's closest friend since college, and she turned up the way close friends do. Unannounced, often, and always with somewhere comfortable to land. Dayan had no problem with Patrice. She was loud and funny, and she brought good energy into the house. He'd always been cordial with her. He slowed the truck out of habit as he approached the house. Then he saw them. Both of them were in the driveway, standing beside the Pathfinder. Brianna was behind the wheel with the door hanging open, one leg out, elbow resting on the frame. Patrice leaned against the side of the car with her arms folded, her head tilted back, grinning the wide, loose grin of a woman deep in a conversation she was enjoying. Neither of them heard him coming. He pulled to the curb 30 yards back and cut the engine. Old habit. He didn't like to box anyone in. The windows were already down, and the afternoon was warm and still. The kind of Tuesday quiet where sound carried farther than you'd expect. He heard Patrice first. "So now you've got no excuse." Her voice was bright, teasing. "You can actually go see him." Brianna laughed. Not her company laugh. Not the polished, presentable one she used at dinner parties and family gatherings. Her real one. The one that came from somewhere low and unguarded. The one Dion used to think was something only he got to hear. "I know," Brianna said. "Dion's truck has been sitting in that garage for 2 years, like a reminder. Now I've got something that's actually mine. You going Thursday?" A pause. "If he's free. I already texted him." Dion did not move. He sat with his hands resting on the wheel and his eyes forward, and he let those words land the way you let cold water hit you. Not fighting it, just registering it, feeling exactly how cold it is. His wife, her real laugh, already texted him. The Pathfinder sat in the driveway, with its pearl-white paint catching the afternoon sun, the same car he had polished in the dark 3 days ago, and Brianna ran her hand along the steering wheel with the easy comfort of a woman sitting inside something she planned to use. Patrice glanced toward the street. Her smile disappeared. She pushed off the car and said something fast and low, too low for Dion to catch. And Brianna looked up. She saw his truck. Nobody moved. Not for a full second. Maybe two. Just the three of them in the hot afternoon quiet. Everybody knowing exactly what had just happened. Then Dion raised his hand. A slow, easy wave. The same one he'd give a neighbor checking the mail. He opened the truck door, stepped out, and walked to the front door. He did not look back. He did not slam anything. He set his keys on the kitchen counter. He poured himself a glass of water from the tap and stood at the kitchen window and drank half of it while his chest did what it needed to do. Then he breathed. Once, slowly. And he made a decision. Not in anger. Not in the hot, breaking way a man makes decisions when the pain is fresh and the room is spinning. Deliberate. Quiet. Final. He would not react. Not yet. Not until he knew everything. 6 minutes passed before Brianna came inside. She was composed, her walk easy, her face arranged. She said Patrice had just stopped by to see the new car. She said she was thinking about starting dinner. She kissed him on the cheek and moved to the refrigerator like the afternoon had been unremarkable. Dion leaned against the counter and nodded. He said dinner sounded good. He asked if she needed him to pull anything from the freezer. She said no. She was fine. She had it. He told her he was going to change out of his work clothes. The hallway smelled like her good perfume. The expensive one. On a Tuesday afternoon, with nowhere on the calendar that he knew of. He filed that away. He went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, in the quiet, still wearing his work shirt, and listened to the soft sounds of Brianna moving around the kitchen below him. The refrigerator opening, a cabinet closing, water running, sounds so ordinary they almost hurt. He stared at the floor, and he began to think, carefully. The way a man in his profession thinks when something in the system doesn't line up, tracing back, looking for the place where the numbers stopped making sense. The Atlanta weekend she'd called a cousin's visit. The gas receipt he'd found in the glove box from a town 40 minutes in the wrong direction. The work events that ran late on nights her office calendar showed nothing. The way Patrice's smile had vanished the instant she saw his truck. He went through each one. He did not rush. He just sat on the edge of the bed and let the picture assemble itself. He didn't sleep. Not really. He lay on his back in the dark beside Brianna, one arm at his side, breathing slow and even, and let his mind do what it did best. Not feel. Not yet. Work. Brianna slept the way she always did, turned toward the window, one hand tucked under her cheek, breathing soft and steady. Dion watched the ceiling fan turn in the dark and thought about the Atlanta weekend, 7 months ago, a Friday to Sunday. Brianna's cousin Keisha, the one in Decatur, the one they'd visited twice in 6 years. She'd said Keisha was going through something, needed her girls around her. Dion had told her to go, had handed her the weekend without a second thought. He'd spent Saturday cleaning out the garage and watching the game. He'd called her Saturday evening. She'd answered on the third ring, voice slightly elevated the way it got when she'd been laughing. He'd heard music. He'd asked if she was at a bar. She'd said Keisha's friend had a place nearby and they'd gone out briefly. He'd said, "Okay, have fun. I love you." She'd said it back. Easy. Automatic. He'd hung up and gone back to the game. Now he lay in the dark and thought about the music behind her voice. Not the kind of music that plays in the background when a group of girlfriends wind down at somebody's place. Louder. Intentional. The kind that sets a room. He filed it. The gas receipt came next. He hadn't even been looking for anything when he found it. Just clearing out the glove box of his truck in February. And it had been tucked under the owner's manual. A receipt from a Shell station in Barnesville, Georgia, 41 miles south. Not toward Atlanta. Not toward her office. Not toward anywhere she'd told him she'd been. He'd noticed the town. He'd noticed the date, a Thursday. He'd put it back. He hadn't asked. He'd given her that. He had given her the benefit of every doubt, one after another, like a man making deposits into an account he trusted. Was sound. The fan turned. Brianna breathed beside him. Dion stared at the ceiling and kept going. By 3 in the morning, he had 11 separate moments. Some were thin, a hesitation, a slight change in routine. Others were heavier. Taken alone, not one of them meant anything certain. But he was not a man who dealt in single data points. He was a man who managed systems, and a system this consistent, this patterned, was not a coincidence. It was a schedule. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, just to be still. He was awake again before the alarm. He waited until he was in his work parking lot the next morning. Engine off, phone in hand, the early crew filing past the front entrance 40 yards ahead of him. He did not make this call from the house. He would not make any call like this from the house, not anymore. He found Ron's name and pressed it. Ron picked up on the second ring. "Yo, you're early." "Yeah." Dion watched a forklift operator badge through the side entrance. "You got a minute?" Something in Dion's tone must have registered, because Ron's voice shifted, lost the easy morning energy. "What's going on?" "I need to ask you." Dion kept his voice flat and calm. "You remember a guy Brianna used to date? Before she and I got together. Adrian something." The silence that followed was not the silence of a man trying to remember. It was the silence of a man deciding how much to say. It lasted 4 seconds. Dion counted. "Wells," Ron said finally. "Adrian Wells." A pause. "Why are you asking me that, Dion? You know who he is." "Yeah." Ron's voice was careful now, measured in a way that was not natural for him. Ron was not a measured man by nature, which meant he was working at it. "I know who he is. How long have you known his name?" Another pause, shorter this time. "A while?" Ron said. Then, quieter. "I can explain that part. Just tell me what's going on first." "Not yet," Dion said. "Soon. I just needed to know if he was real." He could hear Ron on the other end, the particular quiet of a man sitting with something he'd been carrying. "He's real," Ron said. "Yeah, he's real." Dion nodded once, to nobody. "I'll call you this week." He hung up. He sat in the truck for another minute, watching the lot fill up around him. Then he put his phone in his shirt pocket, picked up his badge and his water bottle, and went to work. He managed 3 scheduling conflicts, approved 2 delivery route changes, and sat through an hour-long vendor call without losing focus. He did his job the way he always did, completely, without shortcuts. He said nothing to Brianna that evening, made dinner with her, watched 30 minutes of television, asked about her day. She told him about a campaign brief she was revising. He listened. He asked one follow-up question, the way he always did. She smiled at him from across the couch. He smiled back. Later, pulling into the driveway after a late errand, he saw the Pathfinder waiting under the porch light, its white paint glowing clean and bright against the dark. He walked past it, without touching it, and went inside. The restaurant was a barbecue place off Piedmont Road that Ron had been going to since his 20s. Booth in the back corner, far enough from the kitchen that you could talk without raising your voice. Ron was already there when Dion arrived. A glass of water in front of him, menu closed, phone face down on the table. He'd ordered nothing yet. That told Dion something. Ron always ordered an appetizer before anyone showed up. Dion slid into the booth across from him. A waitress came. They ordered. Dion got the brisket plate. Ron got ribs he wouldn't end up eating much of. When she left, Ron folded his hands on the table and looked at Dion directly. "Tell me what happened," he said. So Dion told him. Not all of it. Not the GPS, not the financial documents. None of that yet. Because none of that had happened yet. Just the driveway. Just what he'd heard. Word for word. The way he'd filed it. Patrice's voice. Brianna's laugh. If he's free. I already texted him. Ron listened without interrupting. His jaw tightened somewhere in the middle of it, but he kept his face still. When Dion finished, the table was quiet for a moment. Then Ron said, "I owe you something." Dion waited. Ron picked up his water glass, looked at it, set it back down. "About 10 months ago. I was at the Capitol Grill with a client. Dinner, nothing major. I was waiting on him near the bar, and I saw a man come in with a woman." He paused. "I didn't see her face right away, but I heard her laugh." He looked at Dion. "It sounded like Brianna. I told myself I was wrong. The lighting was bad, they were across the room, and I only heard it once." He shook his head slowly. "By the time I got a better angle, they were being seated, and her back was to me the whole meal. I couldn't confirm it. But you think it was her?" "I think it was her," Ron said. No hesitation. "Yeah." The waitress brought their food. Neither of them touched it. "The man she was with," Dion said. "What did he look like?" "Tall, well-dressed. The type that makes sure you notice he's well-dressed, you know? Confident in a loud kind of way." Ron paused. "I didn't know his name then. But after your call yesterday, I did some digging. Pulled up his business profile online." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolled briefly, and turned it around. Dion looked at the screen. A professional headshot. A man in his early 40s, sharp jawline, easy smile. The bio underneath read, "Adrian Wells, Principal, Wells Property Group." Dion studied the face for a moment. Then he nodded and handed the phone back. "Tell me about him," Dion said. Ron put the phone away. "He and Brianna were together on and off for about 4 years. Before you." He said it plainly, like a man laying down something he'd been holding at arm's length. It wasn't casual. It was the real thing, or as real as Adrian Wells gets with anybody. The problem was, he was broke and inconsistent, kept pulling away, kept coming back. She stuck it out longer than most women would have. And then he went cold one more time, and she was done. Ron leaned forward slightly. "That's when you came into the picture, Dion. She wasn't over him. She was just out of patience. You were steady. You were everything he wasn't." Dion said nothing. He picked up his fork and cut a piece of brisket, but didn't eat it. 2 years ago, Ron continued, Wells Property Group starts making noise in the local market. Adrian closes a couple of mid-sized deals, gets his name in a few real estate publications. He went from struggling to suddenly looking like something. Ron's voice stayed even, but something behind it wasn't. Word in the business community is he reached back out to some old contacts around that time, rebuilt some old connections, including Brianna. That's my read. Ron sat back. "I don't have proof of the affair, Dion. I want to be straight with you about that. What I have is what I saw, what I know about who he is, and the fact that I should have said something to you a long time ago." He looked across the table with the expression of a man who had earned his guilt fair and square. "I know," Dion said. "I'm sorry. I know that too." Dion set his fork down. "I need you to stay close. Stay available. There's more to this, and I'm going to need your eyes." Ron nodded once, firmly. "Whatever you need. No questions." They sat with that for a moment. Then Ron picked up a rib, and Dion ate his brisket, and the conversation moved into quieter territory. Work. A project Ron was bidding on, nothing of consequence. The kind of talk men use to stay in the same room without making everything heavier than it already is. Dion left first. He walked to his truck in the parking lot, started the engine, and pulled out onto Piedmont Road, heading south. He didn't turn on the radio. The city moved past his windows. Lights, intersections, people walking in and out of places that had nothing to do with him. He drove at an even speed, both hands on the wheel. He was not hoping anymore. Dion's alarm went off at 5:15. He didn't hit snooze. He never hit snooze. He shut it off before the second pulse, and lay still for a moment, listening to Brianna's breathing beside him, slow and even, deep in sleep. Then he got up, dressed in the dark, and went to the garage. The GPS tracker was small, about the size of a matchbox, black, magnetic on one side. He'd ordered it 3 days ago from an electronics retailer, paid with his personal account, had it shipped to his work address. In Georgia, a spouse had the legal right to place a tracker on a jointly registered vehicle. He'd confirmed that before he ever clicked the purchase button. That was the kind of man Dion Carter was. He checked the rule before he made the move. He crouched beside the Pathfinder and reached up under the rear wheel well, pressing the device firmly against the frame until he felt the magnet catch, clean, flush against the metal, invisible unless you knew to look. He stood, dusted his hands on his pants, and went inside to make coffee. By the time Brianna came downstairs, he had his travel mug filled and his keys in his hand. He kissed her on the cheek. She smelled like sleep and the faint trace of whatever lotion she used at night. He told her to have a good day. She told him the same. He drove to work. The tracking app was on his personal phone, not his work one. At 11:14 that Thursday morning, between a logistics review meeting and a call with a vendor out of Memphis, his phone buzzed on his desk. The Pathfinder was moving. He watched the icon trace south out of their neighborhood, then east, then onto the interstate. He kept his face neutral. Around him, his department moved through an ordinary workday. Keyboards, phone calls, the hum of the building's air system. Nobody looked at him. Nobody had any reason to. He tracked the route in 3-minute intervals, 43 miles. The car stopped at 12:02 p.m. at a residential address in a development called Sycamore Ridge, outside the city. He noted the street number and put his phone face down. Then he went to his vendor call. That evening he texted a work contact named Marcus, who handled property research for their regional distribution sites. Marcus owed Dion a favor from a lease negotiation Dion had quietly cleaned up for him the previous year. The text was simple. Need a quick ownership lookup on a residential parcel. Off the books. Marcus responded in under an hour. The property at that address was owned by a holding company, Sycamore Ridge Development Partners, LLC. Dion saved the name and said nothing. The next day, on his lunch break, he drove to the county clerk's office and spent 40 minutes at a public records terminal. LLC registration documents were public record. He'd known that for years. Property logistics had taught him that the paper trail always existed. Most people just never looked for it. Sycamore Ridge Development Partners, LLC, registered 22 months ago. Registered agent listed as a law firm in Buckhead. But the principal member, the name behind the LLC, the name on the formation documents, was clear. Adrian D. Wells. Dion photographed every page with his phone. The formation document, the registered agent page, the principal member declaration. He emailed the photos to himself, then to a dedicated folder he'd created in a secondary email account Brianna didn't know existed. He added the GPS timestamps, the route log, the address, the duration of the visit, 1 hour and 48 minutes. Then he drove back to work and finished out his day. That weekend was ordinary. He and Brianna did the grocery run Saturday morning. The same store they always used, the same list they'd been building variations of for 6 years. She picked up a candle she didn't need. He grabbed an extra box of coffee pods. They cooked dinner together Saturday night. She did the seasoning, he did the grill, and ate on the back patio while the neighborhood quieted down around them. Sunday they ran separate errands in the afternoon and reconvened in the evening. He fixed a slow drain in the hall bathroom that had been bothering him for 2 weeks. She watched something on her laptop at the kitchen table. They talked about nothing in particular. He slept well both nights, deeply, without interruption. There was a name for what he was feeling, though he wouldn't have given it one out loud. It was the particular stillness that settles into a man when he stops arguing with reality. When the hoping is done and the knowing begins. It wasn't peace in the soft sense. It was steadier than that. More like the feeling of ground under your feet after a long time of not being sure where you were standing. Sunday evening, Brianna was curled up on the far end of the couch with her phone. Something made her laugh. A text. A video. He didn't ask. The sound of it moved through the living room and reached him where he sat. He looked at her. He felt everything he was feeling, every last bit of it. And he managed it without a word. He called Patrice on a Tuesday morning from his truck, parked in the lot outside his office building. The sun was still low. His coffee was warm in the cup holder. He had his notes in front of him, but he didn't need them. He knew exactly what he was going to say. She picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Dion." Her voice was careful, just slightly too careful, like someone who had practiced being casual. "Hey, Patrice." He kept his tone easy, warm even. "Sorry to call out of nowhere. I was thinking about doing something special for Brianna. You know our anniversary is coming up." A short pause. "Oh, yeah, of course. I want to do a dinner. Something nice, at the house. Surprise her." He let it sit there. "I figured you'd know better than anybody what she'd want. You two are close." Another pause. Longer this time. "Yeah," Patrice said. "Yeah, I can help with that. I'd really appreciate it." He took a sip of his coffee. "I just want her to feel celebrated, you know? She deserves that." Something shifted in Patrice's voice then. A kind of eagerness that came in too fast, too full, the way it does when a person is trying to fill a space they're nervous about. "She really does," Patrice said. "She's been going through a lot lately. Like, more than people realize. She deserves to have somebody really see her." Dion said nothing for a half-second. Just enough space to let the words land where they needed to. Going through a lot. That was not the language of someone describing a woman who was stressed at work or dealing with a hard season. That was the language of someone making excuses, offering advance softening for things that hadn't been asked about yet. "Yeah," Dion said, his voice unchanged. "She really does. I want to do something she'll remember." They talked for another 4 minutes. Patrice gave him 2 restaurant suggestions for catering, mentioned a florist Brianna liked, said she was happy to help coordinate. Her voice steadied a little as the conversation moved into logistics and away from whatever she'd almost said. By the end of the call, she sounded almost normal. "I'll be in touch," Dion said. "And, Patrice, thanks. I mean that." "Of course," she said. "Any time." He hung up and sat for a moment in the quiet of the truck. "She's been going through a lot. You said that about someone carrying a burden they didn't choose, not about a woman who had been driving 43 miles every Thursday to a man whose name was on an LLC registered 22 months ago." He put the truck in drive and went to work. That evening, he drove to his mother's house. Carol Carter lived in the same house she'd kept since before Dion could remember. A brick ranch with a covered porch and a flower bed along the front walk that she maintained herself, and would until she decided otherwise. He pulled up at 7:15. The porch light was already on. She had seen his headlights from the living room window, the way she always did. She met him at the door with a look that asked the question without asking it. He followed her to the kitchen. She poured him a glass of water without being asked, and sat across from him at the table where he had eaten breakfast for the first 22 years of his life. Then he told her everything. He went in order: the driveway, Patrice's face when she recognized his truck, what he'd heard Brianna say through the window of his own vehicle, the GPS tracker, the drive south, Sycamore Ridge, the LLC, the afternoon he'd spent at the county clerk's office, Adrian D. Wells, Ron's account from dinner, everything Ron had held for nearly a year. And then the phone call with Patrice that morning, "She's been going through a lot," and what that phrasing told him about how long and how well the cover had been maintained. His mother listened to all of it, without a single interruption. She sat with her hands folded on the table, and her eyes on him, steady and still. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet, except for the refrigerator hum and the far-off sound of a neighbor's dog. Carol was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There's something I have to tell you." Her voice was even, but it had the weight of something that had been carried for a long time. 2 summers ago, she said. "The cookout. The one at your Uncle Ray's." She paused. "I went around the side of the house to get to the cooler, and Brianna was there, standing by the fence, on her phone." She looked at her son directly. The way she was talking, her voice, the way she was laughing. It wasn't a girlfriend. It wasn't a co-worker. I knew what I was hearing. I told myself I wasn't sure. I told myself I was reading into it. She stopped. I wasn't sure enough to say something. And I talked myself out of it. I prayed I was wrong. She did not apologize. She did not make herself the subject of it. She simply laid the truth on the table between them the way she would have laid down anything else he needed. "You deserve to know that," she said. "Then, and you deserve to know it now." Dayon nodded slowly. 2 years. Not months. 2 full years. He drove home in the dark. He pulled into the driveway a little after 9 and cut the engine. The Pathfinder sat beside him in the dark, pearl white, the red bow long gone. The house was lit up inside, the kitchen light, the soft glow from the living room where Brianna was probably on the couch. He did not get out of the truck. He sat there with both hands in his lap and looked at the front of the house he had built his life inside, and he let the full weight of 2 years settle over him, not the months he had quietly feared. 2 years, 2 summers, 14 months of overtime that came after at least 6 months of this already being real, already being in motion, already being something Brianna had decided and chosen and continued choosing every single week. She had smiled in this driveway when he brought that car home. She had taken a picture with it. She had kissed him. And she had already known exactly where she was going to drive it. He sat in the dark truck for a long time. He opened the filing cabinet the next morning. It was a 2-drawer metal cabinet in the corner of the home office, the room they called the office but mostly used for storage. Brianna kept her things in the top drawer. His were in the bottom. He had never had reason to go into hers. He had reason now. He pulled the top drawer open. It slid smooth and quiet. Inside, a row of hanging folders, each one labeled in Brianna's neat print. Insurance cards, car paperwork, tax returns going back 4 years, medical records. A folder marked MISC near the back. He pulled the MISC folder first. Inside were receipts, a few expired gift cards, a printed email confirmation for a hotel stay he recognized, their trip to Savannah 2 years ago. He set it aside and moved to the next folder. Then, the next. He found it in a plain manila envelope tucked behind the tax returns. No label. He pulled it out and opened it. It was a single-page document, clean, formal. The header read, Co-Investment Agreement in plain block letters. His eyes moved down the page at a steady pace, taking in each line the way he took in anything important, completely, without rushing. The LLC name was there. Wells Meridian Properties. The amount was there. $14,000. $14,000, The signature at the bottom was there. On the line marked Investor, Brianna M. Carter. The date was 18 months ago. He stood in the quiet office and held the document in both hands and read it again from the top, all the way through, every line. The terms were straightforward. A co-investment stake in a residential development project with a projected return and a dissolution clause. It was a real document, professionally prepared, the kind a man had drawn up when he wanted things to look legitimate. Dion set it on the desk and took out his phone. He photographed every inch of it, front and back. He got the signature, the LLC name, the date, the dollar amount. He photographed it 4 times to make sure each image was clear. Then he put the document back in the envelope, back in the folder, back in the drawer, exactly where it had been. He slid the drawer shut and stood there for a moment with his hand on the top of the cabinet. $14,000. He knew that number. He had lived inside that number. 18 months ago, Brianna had come to him with her voice soft and her eyes worried and told him she'd made an early withdrawal from a personal IRA account she'd had before they married. A penalty, she'd said. There had been a family situation. Her cousin needed help. Something came up fast. She hadn't wanted to burden Dion with it. The amount that hit their joint savings account and then disappeared. $14,000. He had believed her. He had been sorry she'd had to deal with it alone. He had told her next time to come to him first. She had nodded and said she would. He picked up his phone and called Ron. Ron answered on the second ring. "You good?" "I need you to do something for me," Dion said. "I need you to use your contacts and look into Adrian Wells's development project, the one through Wells Meridian Properties. I need to know if the permits are real, if the investor disclosures hold up, and if anything in the way he's been marketing it to outside investors doesn't match what's on record." A beat of silence. "How deep do you want me to go?" "All the way. Give me a few days." "Take what you need," Dion said. "But be quiet about it." "Always," Ron said. That afternoon, Dion sat in a law office 2 towns over. The attorney was a woman named Sandra Okafor, a family law specialist Ron had recommended 18 months ago for a completely different reason. A referral he had tucked away and never used until now. She was precise, unhurried, and asked good questions. Dion laid out the facts in the order they happened and gave her the photographs of the co-investment agreement from his phone. She reviewed them carefully, made notes, and told him what she needed him to understand about joint marital funds, unauthorized transfers, and the legal mechanisms available to him. He left her office with a list of next steps and a court date already penciled in. That same afternoon, he stopped by his bank and began separating his financial accounts. Then he called his insurance provider and changed the beneficiary on his life insurance policy to his mother, Carol Carter. He did not tell Brianna any of this. That evening, he made dinner. They ate together at the kitchen table. Brianna talked about a project at work, something about a client presentation getting pushed. He listened and asked a question or two, the way he always did. She looked at him across the table and asked how his day was. "Fine," he said. That night, after Brianna was asleep, Dion sat in the home office with his phone. He pulled up Patrice's contact and typed out a message. "Dinner at our place. Saturday the 14th, 7 p.m. Don't tell her," and hit send. Then he set a date in his calendar. He put his phone on the nightstand. He lay down in the dark, and he slept. Ron called on a Wednesday morning just after 9. Dion was in his work truck, parked outside a distribution site, coffee going cold in the cup holder. He picked up on the first ring. "I got what you needed," Ron said. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, the particular tone of a man who found exactly what he was looking for and wished he hadn't. "Talk to me." "2 sources," Ron said, "independent of each other, both with access to county permit records." He paused. "The investor packet Adrian circulated, the one he's been using to bring in outside money for the Wells Meridian development. It lists Permit 7C as fully approved. Commercial occupancy permit required before the project can move to the next phase. And it wasn't approved when he sent that packet out. It was still pending. Had been pending for 4 months at that point. He marked it as approved, anyway." Dion said nothing. He looked out through the windshield at the loading dock. "There's more," Ron said. "The projected occupancy numbers in the disclosure documents, the ones he used to justify the return estimates to investors, they don't match anything in the actual site assessment. A contractor I know pulled the original assessment. The numbers Adrian circulated are about 40% higher than what the assessment supports. Not a rounding error, not an honest mistake. He made them up." "He made them up," Ron confirmed. and he used them to solicit money from private investors. Which means this isn't just a real estate licensing issue, Dion. This crosses into securities territory. Dion knew that already. Sandra Okafor had explained the distinction to him during their meeting. Misrepresenting a permit status and fabricating projections in a formal investor disclosure, circulated for the purpose of raising private capital, that was not a paperwork problem. That was fraud. "Send me everything you have," Dion said. "Every document, every source confirmation. All of it. Already compiled. Sending now." "You didn't make noise doing this?" "Asked everything sideways," Ron said. "Nobody knows why I was asking. As far as they're concerned, I was doing background on a potential deal." "Good," Dion said. "I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," Ron said. "Just handle it." Dion spent his lunch break at a FedEx office 2 miles from the distribution site. He printed everything Ron sent: the sourced permit records, the side-by-side comparison of the investor disclosure projections against the actual site assessment, the confirmation timestamps from Ron's 2 contacts. He organized it into a clean stack and slid it into a fresh manila envelope. Then he drove back to work and finished his shift. That evening, from his home office with the door closed, he filed a formal complaint with the Georgia Real Estate Commission through their online portal. He was thorough. He listed every specific misrepresentation, attached the supporting documentation as uploads, and cited the permit number and the date discrepancy precisely. Then he opened a separate browser window. The Georgia Secretary of State's office maintained a division for securities regulation. The complaint form was longer, more detailed. It asked for the names of known investors, the method of solicitation, and the specific false statements made in the offering materials. Dion filled in every field. He attached the disclosure document, the permit records, and Ron's sourced comparison. He noted that the false representations had been made to multiple private investors over a period of at least 8 months. He hit submit on both filings at 9:47 p.m. He printed confirmation receipts for each one. He stapled them to the front of the manila envelope, folded the flap, and set it on the desk. He now had 2 envelopes. The first one, the one from the filing cabinet, the one with the co-investment agreement and Brianna's signature, and the divorce paperwork Sandra Okafor had helped him prepare, sat on the left side of the desk. The second one, the one that had Adrian Wells's name written across the top in quiet ink, sat on the right. He looked at both of them for a moment. Then he picked them up and slid them together into a single accordion folder and set it on the corner of the desk. Thursday came and went. Friday was ordinary. Brianna had texted him from work, asking what she should wear Saturday night. He told her she always looked good in that dark green dress. She sent back a heart emoji. He pocketed his phone and went back to reviewing a shipment manifest. Patrice confirmed she'd be there by 6:30. Dion replied that he appreciated it. His mother, Carol, confirmed as well. He thanked her and told her it meant a lot to have her there. Nobody asked him how he was feeling. That was fine. He didn't need to be asked. The night before the dinner, Dion hung his jacket on the back of the bedroom door. He slid the accordion folder into the interior pocket. Both envelopes, side by side. The jacket hung still and flat against the door. He turned off the desk lamp and came to bed. Brianna was already asleep, one arm folded beneath her cheek, her breathing slow and even. She looked comfortable, unbothered. The dark green dress was already laid out across the chair in the corner. Dion lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. He did not sleep. The table looked good. Dion had set it himself that afternoon. Candles down the center. The good plates, the white ones with the gold rim that Brianna had picked out 2 Christmases ago. A bottle of red breathing on the counter. Nothing excessive, just enough to say this was intentional. He had cooked too. Roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans with garlic. The kind of meal that filled a house with smell and warmth. The kind of meal that said, "I put time into this." He had put time into everything. Brianna came downstairs at 6:15. She was wearing the dark green dress. Her hair was up. Her earrings caught the candlelight when she turned. She looked beautiful. And Dayon looked at her the same way he always had, with genuine recognition, because that part was never a lie. "You cooked," she said, smiling, surprised and pleased. "Figured it was that kind of night," he said. She kissed him on the cheek and went to the counter to pour herself a small glass of wine. She looked around the room, the candles, the table, the jacket hanging neatly on the back of his chair, and her shoulders dropped a little, relaxed. She thought she knew exactly what kind of night this was. Patrice arrived at 6:32, carrying a small gift bag and wearing a blouse that said she'd made an effort. She stepped inside and hugged Brianna first, then Dayon. Her smile was warm, but didn't quite reach her eyes. It hadn't reached her eyes in weeks. Dayon noticed. He always noticed. "This is beautiful," Patrice said, looking at the table. "Dayon, you did all this?" "I did," he said simply. "Glad you're here, Patrice." She looked at him a half-second too long. Then she nodded and moved toward Brianna. Carol arrived at 6:45. She came in quietly, the way she always did. No announcement, no performance. She hugged her son first. He held on a beat longer than usual. She patted his arm once and let him go without saying anything. Then she greeted Brianna with a nod and a composed smile, said hello to Patrice, and took the seat Dayon had placed for her at the far end of the table. She folded her hands in her lap. She was still. Dinner was warm and unhurried. Dayon poured wine. He asked Patrice about her work. He listened to Brianna describe a project her team had launched that week, and he asked a follow-up question, because that was who he was, a man who listened. The food was good. The candles burned low and steady. Anyone walking past the window would have seen 4 people around a dinner table on a Saturday night, and thought nothing of it. Brianna laughed at something Patrice said. Her real laugh, the unguarded one. Dayon heard it and said nothing. He let the meal finish. He let the plates sit. He let the room settle into the loose, comfortable quiet that follows a good dinner. Then he reached behind him and lifted the accordion folder from his jacket on the back of the chair. He set it on the table without a word. He opened it. He removed the first envelope, the one from the filing cabinet, and he laid its contents out in a clean row. The GPS records, printed and time-stamped. The property search showing the address and the LLC. The LLC registration tracing directly to Adrian Wells. The co-investment agreement with Brianna's signature at the bottom. The bank withdrawal record showing $14,000. And a single handwritten note in Carol's precise schoolteacher script. 2 sentences, dated, describing what she had overheard at the family cookout 2 years ago. Brianna's eyes moved across the table. She went very still. Dayon's voice, when he spoke, was even and quiet. "I'm not here for an explanation," he said. "I'm here so you understand clearly that I know everything. All of it. The timeline, the money, where the car went every Thursday. All of it." Brianna opened her mouth. He raised one hand. "Just slightly. Just enough." She closed it. He turned to Patrice. Patrice was looking at the table. "You were in that driveway," Dayon said. "You heard every word she said. And when you saw my truck at the curb, you looked me in the eye while I waved at you, and you said nothing." He paused. "Not then. Not after. Nothing." Patrice did not look up. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were flat on the table, and she did not move them. Dayon reached into the accordion folder and removed the second envelope. He set it down beside the first. The Georgia Real Estate Commission complaint. The Securities Division referral. Adrian's investor disclosure documents with the false permit status circled in red ink. The fabricated occupancy projections laid against the actual site assessment line by line. "That's already filed," Dayon said. "Both of them. Wednesday night." He looked at Brianna directly. "You should call Adrian tonight and tell him the state has some questions. He'll want time to find an attorney." The candles threw soft light across the table. Nobody moved. "I worked 14 months of overtime for that car," Dayon said. His voice did not rise. It did not waver. 14 months. Missed Saturdays. Skipped lunches. "I wanted to see your face when you saw it." He let that sit for one full second. "And the first thing you thought about when you sat behind that wheel was him." The room was completely silent. Dayon stood. He gathered both envelopes and slid them back into the accordion folder. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair and put it on. "You can let yourselves out," he said. Carol was already standing. She did not look at Brianna. She did not look at Patrice. She walked to her son's side, and together they moved to the front door, steady, upright, unhurried, and walked out into the night. The house was quiet when Dayon woke. Not the kind of quiet that meant something was wrong. Just quiet. Still air. Morning light coming through the curtains at an angle. The other side of the bed was empty and cool, which told him she'd been gone for hours. He lay there for a moment, looking at the ceiling. Then he got up, went downstairs, and made coffee. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the dinner. Roasted garlic and candle wax. The good plates were stacked in the drying rack. He'd washed them before bed, because that was the kind of man he was. He poured his coffee, leaned against the counter, and looked at the room. Everything was exactly where he'd put it. He drank his coffee, standing up. He didn't rush. He had nowhere to be. Brianna called Adrian that same night. Dayon didn't know this directly. He learned it later, through the sequence of events that followed, the way you learn most true things, not all at once, but piece by piece, each one confirming the shape of what you already knew. Adrian, upon hearing what Brianna told him, did not reassure her. He did not tell her they would figure it out together. He thanked her for the warning, ended the call, and had a defense attorney retained by the end of the week. He stopped answering her calls after that. Not immediately. He let one or two go through, kept his voice calm and measured, the way men like Adrian perform calmness when they're protecting themselves. But within 10 days, the calls stopped connecting. Brianna left 3 voicemails. He answered none of them. The Georgia Real Estate Commission opened a formal investigation within 3 weeks of Dayon's complaint. It moved the way these things move. Not dramatically, but with the steady, grinding momentum of a process that doesn't need to hurry because it has authority behind it. 2 of the investors Ron had quietly flagged reached out independently after word circulated through the local real estate community that questions were being raised. A 3rd investor, a retired contractor in his late 60s who had distrusted Adrian's numbers from the beginning but lacked the documentation to act, hired his own attorney and filed a civil suit. Adrian's license was suspended pending the outcome of the commission review. His expansion project stalled. The development property, the address the GPS tracker had recorded every Thursday, the address Dayon had traced through an LLC and a public record search in less than 48 hours, was frozen as a contested asset in the civil proceeding. The local real estate community is small. It is built on relationships and reputation and the accumulated trust of deals closed and promises kept. When that trust breaks, it doesn't announce itself loudly. It just gets quiet. Deals stop coming. Calls don't get returned. Names get left off invitation lists for the kind of gatherings where the next opportunity gets mentioned over drinks. Adrian Wells's name got left off a lot of lists. He was not in prison. But the version of himself he had spent a decade constructing, the ascending developer, the man of means and momentum, was gone. And for a man whose identity lived entirely in that image, the difference between prison and what happened to him was smaller than he would have liked. The divorce was finalized in 4 months. The family law attorney had done exactly what he said he would do. The $14,000, documented as joint marital funds, transferred without consent into an investment vehicle that benefited a third party was fully accounted for in the settlement. The Pathfinder, still registered in both names, was retitled solely to Dion. He sold it 3 weeks later. Clean transaction. Fair price. He didn't need it. He had the truck. Brianna moved into an apartment on the east side of the city. Patrice, who had spent 2 months trying to maintain her footing in the social circle they'd shared, found the ground had shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated. Dion said nothing publicly. Not one word. Not one post. He didn't need to. The story moved the way true things move, without drama, accumulating quietly in the spaces between conversations until everyone who needed to know it did. Patrice, now permanently associated with the deception, discovered that the loyalty she'd offered had a cost she hadn't thought to calculate. She and Brianna still talked, but it wasn't the same, and they both knew it. 6 months after the dinner, Dion was living in a smaller house 20 minutes north of where he and Brianna had been. It had 3 bedrooms and a garage and a backyard that backed up to a line of old pine trees. It was his. Only his. The extra bedroom was an office now. There was a weight bench in the garage. He was sleeping 8 hours. He and Ron had signed their second client for the logistics consulting operation 2 weeks prior. Ron kept saying they should celebrate. Dion kept saying there would be time for that. There was always time for that. His mother called every Sunday. They talked longer than they used to, sometimes about nothing in particular. Those were the best calls. On a Saturday morning in early November, Dion stood in his driveway with a coffee cup and nothing on the calendar. The air was cool and still. The pine trees at the back of the yard held their color. His truck sat in the driveway, clean and unhurried, going nowhere for a few hours yet. A neighbor from 2 doors down raised a hand as he walked past with his dog. Dion raised his coffee cup back. He stood there for a while, just stood there, in the quiet and the cool, with nowhere to be and nothing unfinished. Adrian Wells's real estate license was reinstated 14 months later. He never rebuilt what he lost. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.